Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show, a program exclusively designed to promote reproductive health awareness and discuss fertility preservation options. Here is your host, the Harvard-educated fertility specialist, Dr. Amy.
She's known as the Egg Whisperer.
Fertility expert Dr. Amy Abazadeh.
And you have yet another success story
Just launched by an East Bay fertility doctor.
Hi, you guys. Thank you for joining me on tonight's Egg Whisperer Show. The topic is your guide to finding an egg donor, sperm donor, and gestational carrier the Egg Whisperer way. I'm doing this topic because I have so many patients that need to use an egg donor, sperm donor, gestational carrier. So no matter where you live, who you are, who your doctor is, I hope that this show will be helpful. You'll maybe learn something that you can take back to your doctor in order to help you reach your goals in the smoothest way possible. So here, let's get started. When it comes to finding an egg donor, this is what I do with my patients. I talk to them about two options, fresh egg donation and frozen eggs. Here's the difference. When you're using a fresh egg donor, you're going through most likely an agency or an agency that's associated with your doctor's office. You're picking a profile of a woman who's going to go through an IVF cycle. What this means is this: she's going to take drugs, basically the same fertility shots that you would have if you were a woman going through IVF, for about 10 nights and then undergo an egg retrieval. On the day of the egg retrieval, they'll mix the sperm and egg together, and then you have the option of freezing the embryos, genetically testing them, or transferring them fresh. That means that you have to get your uterus prepared for an embryo transfer. The difference between fresh and frozen is this: you'll have to pay for that egg donor's entire IVF cycle, but you will have the option of receiving a donation of all the eggs from that egg retrieval. You're not paying a certain fee per egg. When you're going through a frozen egg donor bank, what you're doing is you're basically paying for a certain number of eggs. So I ask my patients the following question. Number one, how many kids do you want? If the answer is I want 3 or 4, it's more cost effective perhaps to use an egg donor through an agency. If, however, you love a frozen egg donor and you want, let's say, more than 2 kids, or at least 1, maybe 2, an option for 3 is possibly there for you, then consider an egg bank, but see how many eggs that egg donor has frozen for themselves. Here's my process for going through an egg bank. I work with about 5 different egg banks. Are you one of them? You probably know me because I talk to you all the time. I'm constantly asking the following questions. How many eggs does this egg donor have? How many eggs did she get at retrieval? Can I see her genetic profile and her full profile? The other question I ask is, what was the fertilization rate? What was the blast formation rate? How many normal embryos were created, if this is known? And how many pregnancies has she had? I introduce my patients to egg bank directors, and then my patients will do follow-up interviews with each of the banks until they find an egg donor that they're really excited about. That's weird, right? You're really excited to use someone else's DNA. When you're ready to have a baby and you're at that point where you know that you need to use an egg donor, you're going to know when that point is. No one can put you there. No one can force you to be there. You have to be ready. There's no such thing as an egg donor emergency. And when you get to that point where you're really excited about seeing a profile and excited about an egg donor from either an egg bank or an agency, you know you're ready. You know you're ready for that next step. So I also have my patients talk with a psychologist, a genetic counselor, so that we know everything about the possible match between the egg source and the sperm source. What we can also do is free sperm. Believe it or not, you can actually send sperm to the different egg banks and they'll create embryos for us and then ship them back here. And then we can prepare the uterus once we know how many embryos we have. The uterine preparation phase can consist of a number of things, but for the most part, we put women on hormones to get the uterus ready. These hormones mimic ovulation. I also do extra testing on the lining of the uterus in order to make sure I know everything I need to know about, for example, how many hours of progesterone a woman needs to be on before her transfer day. That test is called the endometrial receptivity assay. I also do a number of other tests like a preconception panel to make sure that the thyroid is normal, the vitamin D, for example, is normal, prolactin is normal, and she's immune from measles. So these are the steps that I take to give my patients the best chance of pregnancy. And at the same time, if we're using eggs from an egg bank, we don't want to ignore sperm. We want to make sure not only that the sperm is genetically compatible, like I already said, but also that the sperm quality is where we need it to be. While it does take 1 healthy egg, it also takes 1 healthy sperm to make a healthy embryo. When it comes to using an egg donor from a fresh egg from an agency. I work with agencies that will allow me to interview egg donors ahead of time without my patients paying the very high agency fees. I also work with egg banks that will allow me to screen the egg donor, to run tests like the AMH level, FSH, estradiol, and do a carrier screen first, if it hasn't already been done. I'm also given an opportunity to interview the egg donor, to talk with them over the phone, in person, or over a video call. This gives me an excellent impression of whether I think this egg donor will be a good match with my family. Most of my families who are ready to use an egg donor, I've been working with them for a really long time. So you can imagine when I'm interviewing an egg donor, I'm going to know if personality-wise that egg donor is a good match for this family. And I'll ask questions that I want someone to ask on my behalf if I were to use an egg donor. For example, I'll ask the egg donor, why did you decide to donate eggs? How would you feel if a child born from this donation were to reach out to you? And would you like to know who the family is? Do you want to be updated about pregnancies? And then I want to take those answers back to the family that I'm working with. And then we work with psychologists that can also do a group meeting so everyone can meet each other if that's something that we want done first. DNA privacy is a thing of the past. Millions of people each year do genetic tests. So you can assume if you are the receiver of the gift of egg donation, that your child at some point in their life will find out that they were born from an egg donation. So talking to a psychologist about how this makes you feel as a parent of a donor-conceived child, reading books to your children, and reading books yourself about how to approach these very sensitive topics with your children in a way that makes it seem not taboo and not shameful is so important. So I hope this little bit on how I prepare my patients for using an egg donor is helpful to you. Let's go to sperm donation. How do you pick a sperm donor? No, you don't go on Craigslist and start posting ads. Believe me, that never works out for anybody. However, there are a number of great sperm banks. And guess what? I work with them too. So if you're a patient that's looking for an egg donor and sperm donor, go to your doctor and tell them, hey, what do you recommend is the best process for me? There are some doctors that might say, hey, just, go buy a sperm vial and then ship it here. But my process is a little different. And if your doctor doesn't have the process that I have, believe it or not, you can bring this information to your doctor first before you purchase a vial. Here's what I do. I ask my patient, and if it's, let's say, 2 women, I'm not going to say, hey, I think you look like a guy, so send me a picture of yourself so I can find a guy that looks like you. What I mean by that is I like to do something called photo matching. So I'll say to a patient, can you send me a photo of yourself, whether it's a female's photo or a woman and her father and brother, and I'll say, I'd like to share that with the director of the sperm bank and see if they think that they have a match. Almost all sperm banks have this option where you can communicate directly with them. They even have photo matching forms that you can fill out, submit pictures, and then they'll send you profiles back that they think would be a really good match. The sperm banks, they meet all the sperm donors there. The directors would know who these people are because that's kind of a personal thing. You walk up to a sperm bank, people know who you are, so they get a sense of their personality, literally how they dress, how they talk. So I'll tell a sperm bank director, I'll say, hey, look, these are the 3 top picks that my patient has at your sperm bank. Who do you think is the best one? That's really important. You want to make sure someone's looking out for you. Some of the sperm banks have really cool features like chat groups where people who have donor-conceived children can then meet up online, and then perhaps that turns into, in-person meetings as well. You hear about stories of people who are donor-conceived meeting their DNA siblings in the future. If that's something that you want as an option, see if the sperm bank that you're working with can do that for you. I talked about using a psychologist. I think it's equally important when using a sperm bank as well, because you want to talk about the same things. When are you going to tell your children? How are you going to tell your children? And is open access or open identity something that you want to have as an option? Because there's certainly other ways of meeting those expectations that you have for your children as far as what you want to see for them in the future. There are some people out there that can actually find you a sperm donor that would be open to being a part of your child's life from the very beginning. You can do that through an attorney, and I know many who can help you with that. And there are certain companies, for example, like Donor Concierge. That's one of them that I've been working with for I think almost 10 years now. So they can help my families find not only egg donors and sperm donors, but also gestational carriers. Looking at genetic compatibility when it comes to a sperm donor is really important. Most sperm banks nowadays will do genetic screens. If, let's say, the egg source is a carrier for cystic fibrosis, you want to make sure that the sperm donor is also not a carrier for cystic fibrosis. Most sperm banks will check for that disease, but if they don't, you want to reach out to the sperm bank and see if there's an option for you to have that sperm donor screened. I can, as a physician, send a kit to that clinic and have them reach out to the sperm donor for that screening test if it hasn't been done. So you don't have to feel like you have to find a sperm donor that is a perfect genetic match. However, if you find a donor that you love and hasn't had that test, then you can find out later. I don't want you to miss out an opportunity to use a sperm donor that you feel a really strong connection with because you think that these kinds of tests can't be done. A lot of people ask me if blood type is important, and blood type is not important from a compatibility standpoint. If, for example, the egg source or uterine source is Rh negative and the sperm donor is Rh positive, it just means that the person carrying the pregnancy, if they are Rh negative, will need a shot called RhoGAM in pregnancy. But it doesn't mean that the pregnancy will be dangerous. It doesn't mean that the pregnancy will be high risk. So far I've reviewed two things: how to find an egg donor, how to find a sperm donor, and you'll basically see there's one general theme. Talk to your doctor and ask questions. Print out the profiles, bring them in. I ask my patients to give me their top 3 to 6 profiles, depending on how many they are, and we'll go through the pros and cons literally with each one of them. I'll say, look, this one is this age, and these are the genetic issues in their family, these are the cancers in their family or neurological diseases that we've learned about, and we'll compare them to the other one. I'll give you an example. Let's say I have a patient whose father is an alcoholic, and she has a sperm donor that she's looking at that she really likes, but the father, uncle, sister, brother, all alcoholics. Well, we know that there's a genetic predisposition to alcoholism, so perhaps that's an egg donor or sperm donor that we wouldn't use. So having a doctor who's going to look out for you and look at these things with you is really important. So take the time out of your really busy schedule, get this stuff printed out, put it in a binder, bring it in, label them 1, 2, 3, show them to your physician, and see what they think with you. These are the things I automatically do, and if your physician isn't doing that, that's okay. But you can take the time, make that appointment to go through these profiles ahead of time. Because when you're searching through profiles, I assume you know in general what to look for, but there are certain things that I look for that I want to make sure that you know about. So I'm hoping you're learning about this in this show. So now I want to talk about, that sounded funny, now I want to talk about how to find a gestational carrier, the egg whisperer way. I won't use a gestational carrier that I wouldn't use for myself. What does that mean? I'm looking for someone that's really healthy, evenly keeled, in a very stable relationship, and if they're not in a stable relationship, that's okay too. I want to make sure that they have very, very strong family supports. I also want to find a carrier who doesn't plan on having any life changes in the next year. For example, if she lives in California, I don't want her to, let's say, move to Florida and have us not be aware that that was going to be a life change that she was always planning on. I want to make sure that she wasn't in the process of separating from her partner or going through a stressful divorce. I want to make sure that from a job standpoint, if, let's say, her insurance is through her husband's job, that his job is stable. For example, the company isn't planning a restructuring. These are the things that I ask my carriers about. I also look at medications that they've taken for anxiety and depression, and I look for a history of postpartum depression. So you hear me talking a lot about mental health, but physical health is helpful too. Not just helpful, it's super important. So we do the same screens on a gestational carrier that I would do for a patient of mine who's ready to basically carry a pregnancy herself. Making sure the thyroid's normal, vitamin D is normal, that the immunizations are up to date, and drug screen's clear, background check has been done. But when it comes to finding a carrier, how do you actually go through that process? Well, it's basically the same way that I just described to you that I take for an egg donor and sperm donor. I do the same thing with a gestational carrier. I have agencies that I work with really closely all throughout the country. I have some in, for example, Illinois, Idaho, Utah, the state of Washington, the state of California. So with this large network of carrier agencies, I can then reach out to them and say, hey, this is what my family is looking for. And I have people that are very specific, and I ask them that question. So if you don't have a doctor that's asking this question, go to them and say, this is what I'm looking for. Where do you think I can find a carrier like this? So I asked my family, can you please describe to me the perfect carrier and the relationship you want with them? I have patients that say, I would love to work with someone who is, a stay-at-home mom, who's under the age of 33, who's never had a C-section. Like, these are the things that some people feel really strongly about. I also have other patients that say, I really want to use a carrier who's done this before, and they have their reasons for doing that. And then I will reach out to the agencies that I work with, and I'll ask for profiles to be sent to me. I'll go through those profiles, and without having my patients meet the carriers, I'll then say, hey, you know what? I think these profiles might work for you. What do you think? And then if a patient really feels a connection, gets really excited about a profile, just like I want my patients to get excited about an egg donor and sperm donor, then I will say, I will now interview that carrier. I will go through their medical records. I will review them page by page and make sure, again, that I would use them myself as a carrier if I needed a carrier. Same thing with egg donor and sperm donor. I have the same approach. I want to use an egg donor that I would use for myself. I want to use a sperm donor that I would use for myself, because if I apply the knowledge that I have to each person's case, then I can make sure that patients are protected and are given the best chance for a healthy pregnancy. The other thing that I talk to carriers are about, whether they would be okay with doing a C-section. Believe it or not, that can come up. Whether they'll be okay with doing procedures like an amniocentesis, and also talking to them about the possibility of transferring more than one embryo. I have patients that are over 40 that choose not to genetically test their embryos. So transferring more than one embryo is something that I talk to carriers about and educate them about, because for the most part, most of our transfers are done with single embryos and they're genetically tested. The other thing I want to say about using a gestational carrier agency is there are wonderful agencies out there. The agency's fees are very, very high. I work with wonderful agencies, but I want to make sure that the carrier is who we're really working with. So my process is the same thing. Interview the carrier, and then once I feel like that carrier is a good match, then I will have my patient introduce my patient to the agency, and then they'll talk to the agency about what it takes to take things to the next step. Often that involves some fees, of course, and there are some agencies that I work with in California and Idaho will allow me to even screen carriers first without patients paying a high agency fee. You hear a lot of stories about people, starting the process and it breaking down, and it starts to break down at different stages. Of course that has happened to me. Of course, there are things that happen where a carrier, let's say, like I said, husband loses his job, loses insurance, things just aren't right, there's relationship issues. But for the most part, we try and do things so that we don't have those kinds of issues as much as possible. But at the end of the day, we're working with human beings who have feelings and things change in life. So as a carrier, if you're watching this, know that when you're using someone else's DNA, sometimes things don't happen the way you're used to. Women become carriers because they're really good at carrying a pregnancy. And sometimes things happen like a miscarriage. And that can just shatter a gestational carrier's world. Of course that can shatter my patient's world. There's no doubt about that. But I work hard on making sure that the emotions of the carrier are well taken care of throughout this process. If, let's say, there's something like a negative pregnancy test or a miscarriage, and same thing for my patients, so that we're all looking out for each other, taking care of each other, and making sure that we are close and on the same team, and that we're always looking out for one another. I could talk about this topic all day, as you can tell. I can talk about fertility all day. Egg Whisperer show could be Egg Whisperer day, week, year. So thank you guys for tuning in to tonight's show. I wish I had better jokes. If you're looking for some good jokes, I could tell some, but they might be rated R. So thank you guys for watching tonight. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to my YouTube show. Please also post a review on my podcast. That would be great. Only 5 stars though, please. Please don't post a review if it's less than 5 stars. Thanks guys. Have a great night. Talk to you soon.
Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show, a program exclusively designed to promote reproductive health awareness and discuss fertility preservation options. Here is your host, the Harvard-educated fertility specialist, Dr. Amy.
She's known as the Egg Whisperer.
Fertility expert Dr. Amy Abazadeh.
And you have yet another success story.
Just launched by an East Bay fertility doctor.